While we were dating, my brother got my girlfriend pregnant. My devout parents expelled me and used my college funds to pay for the baby's nursery. Years later, when they lost everything, they called me and begged for money. It had been easy. I had persuaded myself, however. I had a plan, I was young, I was ambitious, and I was in love. Emily, my girlfriend, and I were making plans for the future. In college, we were both committed to completing our degrees and facing the world together. My folks were encouraging. They were the stereotypically ideal couple who attended church. The type of folks who talked about hard work and family values and who never missed a Sunday worship. Yes, they were severe, but they were always there for you. That's what I believed anyway. I had been dating Emily for 3 years. We clicked right away when we first met our freshman year. We had enormous dreams of our own. I always believed that I would ultimately pay off my college debt, find a reliable career, and possibly purchase a suburban home. I had a mental image of it already. The American dream, us, a dog, and a family. However, nothing had prepared me for the impending storm. Emily informed me of her pregnancy late one evening. I lost all breath when the words hit me like a freight train. This was not what I was expecting. We weren't prepared. We were still getting our bearings. Like me, she had her own dreams. But there it was, a reality that could not be denied, there in front of us. The weeks that followed were a blur. Hours passed while we considered our alternatives. Emily desired to retain the child. Despite her fear, she had already made up her mind. She was not to blame. Although I was also afraid, I agreed with her choice. The more I considered it, the more I understood that a completely new chapter was about to begin. And it wasn't just about me this time. Together, we were the focus. But the day I learned that my brother Ryan had also dated Emily, everything changed. She admitted it, and I can still feel the kick in my stomach. Her face was buried in her hands as she sobbed. Nothing could ease the hurt, no matter how many times she apologized. I had always thought of my brother as my best friend, but he had deceived me. Not only had she deceived me, but he had also gotten her pregnant. I was speechless. That moment completely upended my existence. How could he harm me like this? Could she? I attempted to assemble it, but it seemed insurmountable. I had been dating Emily for more than 2 years. How did this occur? I gave Ryan a call. He had to tell it to me. He pretended that it was unimportant when I questioned him about it. He had never expressed regret. He simply stated that we had to move on once it occurred. Go on. It was as though my heart had been torn out of my chest. I was unable to comprehend it. Not from him. My parents were the next in line. They appeared strangely at ease when they learned of the pregnancy. Too quiet. I can still clearly recall my mother's response. She merely gave me a blank look before whispering something about God's plan. All of it, she added, was a test of faith that each of us had a purpose and that we needed to accept it. Having always been the tough one, my dad simply nodded his approval. The fact that Ryan was participating was not even mentioned. They simply ignored it as if it didn't exist. However, I lost it when they began discussing the family. They told me that I should stand behind Ryan, that this was our opportunity to be loving and forgiving, and that I should stop being angry. God has a plan for it all. According to them, my mother did say that. Nothing I said could make them change, no matter how much I wanted to yell and tell them how they had let me down. They were unable to recognize the harm this was doing to me because they were so consumed by their faith. There was chaos in the days that followed. My folks insisted that I help Ryan and forgive him. They made an effort to persuade me that it was in the best interests of society. They advised me to overcome it and become a stronger guy. They claimed that since I was the older brother, I need to lead by example. There was so much hypocrisy. They stated it was my turn to make amends because they had given up so much for me. I felt like I was being suffocated more and more as they talked. Now I could see it plainly. I was losing all I had fought for and everything I had imagined for the future. My aspirations to become successful, live on my own, and graduate. Everything was moving like sand between my fingertips. It wasn't just that my life was falling apart. My family's choices, an unavoidable betrayal, and a plan that wasn't mine were taking control of it. The worst part, however, came next. My parents betrayed me. At first, they didn't say it directly, but every discussion and recommendation they gave me about how to respond to situations seemed like an assault. Their decision had been made. They would stand by Emily and Ryan, and I was supposed to follow suit. I informed them I was unable to. I was unable to help Ryan. Not after his actions. I was unable to assist with the baby. I didn't have time to clean up my brother's mess. I had my own future to consider. It was not warmly received by them. My dad was enraged. He accused me of being self-centered and of leaving my family when they most needed me. My mother pleaded with me to think again, and her voice cracked. She stated that I would regret it, that this was a test of faith, and that I couldn't abandon my brother. However, their statements lacked coherence. Ryan had never once been held responsible for his actions. He had never been asked to make amends by them. It happened at that moment, the point at which everything was altered. I was expelled by them. It was a chilly, calculated conclusion rather than a great dramatic showdown. They informed me that I was no longer allowed to remain in the house. They claimed that if I was going to keep being so negative and polarizing, they couldn't have me around. They instructed me to go, and that unless I apologized to Ryan and agreed to the plan, I would never be allowed to return. That was the end of it. They converted my room into a baby's nursery using my college fund, which I had saved so hard to earn and entrusted to them for safekeeping. My entire world seemed to fall apart. Now, a child who wasn't even mine was using the space that had once been full of hopes and dreams. I had nothing to do with the chaos that was erasing my future, my education, and my freedom. It was God's design, according to my parents. They said that everything was done for a greater good. I was unable to view it, though. I could only see the ruins of everything I had fought for and everything I had held dear. They didn't even offer an apology. They simply stated that it was necessary. They were also directly in front of them. I was basically expected to accept the fact that this was now their route. I then left through the door, and I didn't look back for the following 3 years. It seemed as though my entire world had been turned upside down during the first several weeks following my departure. I spent some time with a friend, crashing on his couch as I processed all that had just transpired. It was my only choice, but I hadn't planned on it. I had nothing to cling to but my own obstinate pride. I had no home or network of support. I didn't want to feel sorry for myself, but every time I considered how everything had gone wrong, a flood of bitterness swept over me. I was unable to retrieve my college funds. I couldn't afford to suit them. The silence was the worst. I was excluded from my family's plans for the first time in my life. I have nothing to do with it. No dinner invitations, no text messages, no phone calls. I felt as though I had simply been erased. Once promising me the world, my parents had now turned their backs on me and treated me as though I were an enemy. I tried calling them every time, but all I got was chilly answers or conversations about the baby. They made no effort to comprehend. Ryan, Emily, and the kid were all that mattered to them. They no longer even considered me a footnote. Ryan was everywhere, too. My parents were always talking about him, how he was taking charge, how he was supporting Emily, and how he would be a wonderful father. They pretended that there had been no interaction between us. They pretended that I had betrayed them by declining to assist. The fact that he had gone too far in the worst possible direction was irrelevant. They believed that they could put all of their hopes in him. It was illogical. I had sacrificed everything to support them and act morally. However, they had abandoned me just when I needed them most, for the benefit of a child who wasn't even mine at that. It was a nasty prank. People who didn't even want to hear my side of the story were rewriting my entire life. They didn't even realize the damage they had done since they were too preoccupied with their plans. For the following few months, I basically tried to make ends meet. I decided it was better than nothing and started taking classes at a community college. In an effort to make ends meet, I took a part-time job at a coffee shop. I made an effort to ignore my background and my parents' actions, but the fury would always seep in, no matter how hard I tried. The treachery was a constant reminder of everything I had lost, and it kept eating away at me. However, I had long since given up on expecting anything from my family. I hadn't seen or considered the number for years when it flashed on my screen. I stared at it for a bit, wondering if I should respond. My curiosity prevailed. With an almost scientific detachment, I lifted the phone to my ear and swiped to accept. Her little, quivering voice broke through the line. My mom was the one. As if the mere sound of my name might save her, she spoke it like a plea. I said nothing, allowing her to be further depressed by the weight of her own despair. She must have felt uneasy by the silence, since she started to explain right away. She spoke incoherently and clumsily, her words stumbling over one another. They had lost everything, she informed me. They used to take stability for granted, including the house and their finances. Everything was gone. I couldn't explain it, she remarked. There was a faint reference to a swindle and something about a failed investment. According to her, my father had been too arrogant to acknowledge their problems until it was too late. They were now sinking, barely making ends meet, and barely making enough money to buy food. With her voice breaking under the strain of her own embarrassment, she inquired as to whether I was still present. With a purposefully even dispassionate voice, I told her I was listening. When they abandoned me, I wanted her to sense the gap, the distance they had made. Her words trailed off, but she persisted. They apologized for their mistakes, she claimed. She expressed regret for their treatment of me and stated she wishes things had turned out differently. Now that they had no one else, she pleaded with me to come home, to be the son they needed, to assist them. I waited till she finished speaking, and her cries lingered in the air like smoke in a room that was closed. When I did speak, it was in a cool, collected, almost clinical tone. I informed her that they had determined they didn't need me 3 years prior. It's been 3 years since they awarded all I've worked for to someone who didn't deserve it. I informed her that I've been trying to get out of the hole they had plunged me into for those years, rebuilding my life on my own, brick by brick. Now, after all this time, she believed that with a few tears and a flimsy apology, she could pick up the phone and reverse everything. I didn't speak louder. I didn't have to. Every statement cut through whatever residual misconceptions she might have had about forgiveness like a scalpel. She attempted to interrupt, but I stopped her. I informed her that she was not entitled to change history simply because it currently suited her. I informed her that I meant nothing to them both then and today. Desperate, her voice broke. She questioned whether I truly detested them enough to abandon them in their misery. Blood was thicker than water, she added, and they were my parents. The sound of my laughter even astonished me. I informed her that they only seemed to care about blood when it was convenient for them, like when they wanted someone to clean up after themselves after making a mess. I then uttered the words that I knew would cause the greatest pain. I informed her that I couldn't comprehend God's purpose because I was only a human. I hurled her own sacred words back at her with a blade that could have drawn blood. I reminded her of all the times she had urged me to submit to God's will and set aside my emotions for the benefit of the family. Who was I to get in the way of God's plan? I told her. Just like she expected me to tolerate being shunned, she should accept it too. She begged me to change my mind as she sobbed into the phone. I didn't budge when she apologized and said they had learned their lesson. I informed her that it was up to them and God, not me, to repent. I didn't save them. They didn't give me another chance. She made an effort to bring back memories of our happy days together as kids. She claimed to still love me as much as she did back then. I explained to her that love couldn't be turned on and off like a faucet. When they threw me out of their home, I informed her that they didn't show me affection. When they took my money, degraded me, and claimed it was God's will. Her tears became more desperate and louder. However, I choose not to let it impact me. Too many days have been spent wondering if I would ever be whole again, and too many nights have been spent crying by myself. I could no longer hear her tears. What had been done could not be reversed. I assured her that I owed them nothing. Not my money, my time, not even my pity. I informed her that their decisions had repercussions and that it was not my responsibility to protect them from them. I reminded her of the nursery they had constructed in my former room, the one intended for my brother's child, now that they were at last feeling their weight. I advised her to look at the son they choose over me right now. He was the one who ought to have stepped up to save them. I was done, but she pleaded with me not to end the call. I expressed to her my hope that they would find solace in their faith, the same faith that they used as a weapon against me. I then hung up the phone. I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a long time. I thought I would feel something, sadness, anger, and even guilt. However, there was only a chilly, vacant silence. Brick by brick, they had erected this gap between us. It was impenetrable now. As if nothing had happened, I put the phone down and resumed my previous activities. Perhaps it was my biggest fear, that I no longer gave a damn about their pleading, their tears, or their sorrow. I had allowed them to turn me into a stranger. There was no turning back now. One update. Rianua was the one. He began with a cool, almost casual hello. "I want to talk," he said. Memories came flooding back as soon as I heard his voice. Recollections of the man who had contributed to the chaos that completely upended my world. My throat became dry and my stomach constricted. However, I refused to let him affect me. I didn't. I asked him in a cool, reserved tone what he wanted. I had no intention of making things simple for him. He acknowledged the mess, but he argued that wasn't the main problem. He said he had to give me an explanation. He sounded grave, as though he had been holding back these remarks for a very long time. I found myself listening even though I detested the man. Despite my best efforts to avoid it, a part of me still hoped for some sort of apology or accountability. Ryan continued to speak slowly, as if he were picking his words deliberately. He acknowledged his mistake. He claimed that everything had gotten out of control and that he was unsure of how to handle it all. His voice softened as he admitted that he regretted everything and that he had never meant for things to get this bad. For an instant, I nearly believed him. I nearly persuaded myself that his comments were accompanied by regret. However, the rage returned more quickly than I could control it. As I said sorry again, my voice trembled and my sarcasm was evident in every word. Was it his only statement? Was he really attempting to minimize the situation to a brief apology? I wasn't buying it after everything they had done to me, including their deceit, selfishness, and disrespect for me. I reminded him that he needed to do more than just apologize. It was far from sufficient. I had lost everything to him. In one reckless deed, he had ruined it all. He now wanted me to simply take his apologies and go on with my life. Ryan took a while to reply. I could just hear him pondering, trying to find the proper words to keep the discussion going. I was no longer concerned. He had no regrets. The only thing he regretted was being caught. He was sorry that things didn't work out the way he had hoped. It didn't matter that he was sorry. The fact that my own family had abandoned me and left me behind was unaffected by his regret. His voice was softer and more emotional than I had ever heard when he eventually spoke again. He assured me that he wasn't attempting to put me through any kind of guilt trip, nor was he requesting my money or my assistance in fixing his problems. "I'm trying to make things right for me, for Emily, and for the baby," he replied gently. The weight of those words lingered between us, and I could feel it, but it made no difference how earnest he sounded. He was unable to resolve this. Never, ever. I was unable to listen any longer. I told him to stop and snapped at him. I had had enough of hearing it. It had to do with him and the harm he had caused, his decision to harm me and abandon what we had ever shared. There was nothing he could do to alter that. Ryan apologized once more, his voice faltering. I was done, even if it seemed more urgent this time. I was done listening. The hurt would not go away, even if he apologized 1,000 times more. The damage he had inflicted would not be repaired. I told him I was not interested in hearing it. I hung up the phone after that. The second update. The phone rang once more after a week had passed. The name on the screen was different this time. They threw me out to make space for my brother's wife, Emily, who is the mother of the child. I considered responding for a second, but curiosity won out once more. I wanted to know what justification she might have for getting involved in this mess. She spoke in a quiet, almost shy voice, as though she were being extremely careful. She said, hesitantly, that it had been too long since we had spoken and that she hoped I was doing well. I remained silent, allowing the uneasy stillness to linger between us. I wasn't going to give her an easy time. She finally made her point. She claimed that my mother had informed her about the call from last week and how awful, really awful, things were. She pleaded with me to consider my nephew, but she acknowledged that she could understand why I was furious. She said that he was innocent throughout it all and that he shouldn't have to endure the consequences of the adult in his life's faults. I could feel the rage slowly and sneakily rising to the surface. She was bringing a child into the mess they had caused, and she had the gall to call me and ask me to solve it. I gritted my teeth, fighting the fury that was building inside of me, but she persisted. Despite the fact that we had never met, she said that my nephew loved me. She said I could make all the difference if I could only find it in my heart to forgive them and give him a chance at a good life. I interrupted her in a chilly, hushed voice. "Stop," I said. I informed her that I didn't want to hear about that child anymore. I informed her that she was even more naive than I had assumed if she believed that talking about him would miraculously take away the years of suffering and betrayal I had experienced. She stumbled, obviously surprised by my tone. She claimed she only wanted me to see reason and wasn't attempting to offend me. According to her, family members should support one another, particularly during difficult times. I lost it at that point. I informed her that, given everything they had done, she had no right to lecture me about family. I told her that in order to create way for her and her child, they cast me out like trash. I reminded her that they had set up a nursery for the son of the man who had deceived me in the most heinous manner using my education funds. I advised her to turn to my brother, the chosen one, if she wished to discuss family. Now where was he? What prevented him from taking the initiative to salvage the day? She made an effort to defend him by claiming that he was trying his hardest and working hard to provide for their family. She said that they only needed a little assistance to get back on their feet because he was under a lot of stress. I gave a sharp, bitter laugh. I doubted anything had changed after I informed her that her spouse had been a self-centered, careless leech all of his life. I informed her that it was her fault, not mine, if she married him with any different expectations. I assured her that I owed nothing at all to her, them, or their child. She broke down in tears and pleaded with me to think again. She claimed that they were in danger of losing everything and that she had no idea how they would survive. She claimed she didn't know where else to turn and that she was afraid for her child's future. Her tears only made me more irate. I advised her to consider her feelings before interacting with my brother if she was afraid. She had to lie in the bed she had created. I informed her. I informed her that she was responsible for her child's destiny, not me, and that she would need to find someone else to believe her sober narrative if she wanted to play the victim. Her voice trembled as she made one final attempt. She claimed she was aware of my goodness and that I still had a great concern for my family. She expressed her belief that I could find it in my heart to forgive them, if only for the child's sake. The final straw was that. The words came out of me, piercing and sharp. I referred to her as a coward for assuming she could control me by using a child. Because she thought I would ever forgive them, I labeled her insane. She expected me to clean up the mess her husband made, so I labeled her selfish. She and my brother were a match made in heaven. I told her there were two individuals who took and took without ever giving anything back. By the time I finished, she was crying uncontrollably. She opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. Tears wouldn't work on me, so I told her to hold back. I instructed her to inform my brother, parents, and anybody else who would listen that I was tired of being used as a scapegoat. I hung up before she could answer. My hands trembled, but not because of guilt. It was the kind of rage that lingered long after the flames had subsided, leaving a sour aftertaste in your mouth. I sat there looking at the phone for a long time. I considered the innocent child she had brought up, the one she had attempted to use as leverage. I experienced a brief twinge of shame, but it was short-lived. I wasn't responsible for the child. I had nothing to do with him. It wasn't me that introduced him to such an unstable and chaotic world. No, they were to blame. My parents, my brother, and his spouse. They made their decisions. With their own hands, they ruined their lives. They were now frantically trying to find someone to blame or someone who could help them. However, I would never be that person. The third update. I was taken aback when the church called me 15 days later. It had been years since I'd given them any thought. Growing up, religion had played a major role in my family's lives, but it had never been so much a source of solace as a means of control. On the other line, the voice identified himself as Pastor Miller, whom I faintly recalled from my adolescence. He called to discuss my family and said he hoped I remembered him. I prepared myself for the typical moral lecture or guilt trip. Rather, his voice was cool, collected, and unexpectedly sympathetic. He stated that he wanted to mediate if I was amenable to it, but he wasn't here to take sides or put any pressure on me. He clarified that my parents had discussed my arrangement to the church, pleading for assistance. He reasoned that before making any assumptions, it might be worthwhile to try to hear my side of the story. His method disarmed me in some way. His voice was devoid of any implicit duty or judgment. He made it plain that I had complete control over this and that he appreciated my decision to decline. I felt like someone was willing to listen rather than just preach for the first time in years. On my terms, though, I agreed. I informed him that this would not be a reconciliation or a sob story. He must have a thorough understanding of everything if he was calling to play peacemaker. He concurred and asked if I would mind giving my perspective. I began to carefully narrate the circumstances that had caused me to become estranged, as though I were narrating a scenario that had happened to someone else. My tone was restrained, bordering on clinical. Silently, Pastor Miller listened. His sole answer is a sporadic buzz of recognition. I told him about the next years, the heartache and rage, and the lingering feeling of betrayal. I explained how, without them, I had pieced my life back together and how their latest efforts to get back in touch felt like a last-ditch effort to take advantage of me once more. There was a long pause when I was done. As Pastor Miller took in all I had spoken, I could hear the faint crackle of the connection. When he finally spoke, I was surprised to hear compassion in his voice. He added that no one should have to go through such betrayal, especially from their own family, and that he was sincerely sorry for what I had gone through. He claimed that he was unaware of the full scope of the incident and that it was obvious that my parents had only given him a portion of what had transpired. He acknowledged that he had been ready to ask me to think about forgiving me, but he now realized that this was more complicated than just letting go. According to him, it was obvious that my family's act had created long-lasting trauma, and any forgiveness would need to be granted according to my schedule and terms. Here was a church member, a representation of the very religion my parents had turned against me, admitting that I had been wronged. It was an odd, almost dreamlike sensation, as if a burden I was unaware I was carrying had been somewhat relieved. I expressed my gratitude for his forbearance, but I made it plain that I had no plans to make amends with my family. I informed him that their latest appeals for assistance seemed more like manipulation than sincere remorse. I clarified that I couldn't rely on them to change and that I didn't want to expose myself to further suffering. Pastor Miller stated that he would not pressure me to change my mind and that he appreciated my choice. According to him, healing is a very personal journey, and he has no right to tell me how or when I should go about it. He promised to keep praying for me, not in the vacuous, theatrical manner I had become used to, but in the hope that I might find serenity in whatever way that might be. I was appreciative,